Hello everyone, my name is Marius Martin and I will be your writing CTO for the 2017-2018 school year. Before diving deeper into content, I want to take a moment to tell you a bit more about myself. I am currently entering my third year of teaching fourth grade at Heights Primary. This will, however, be my fourth year of teaching fourth grade and my 11th year in education. One interesting fact is that I spent 7 of these years teaching English at public, international, and language schools abroad. Above all, I'm very excited to serve you this year, and I'm looking forward to growing our crafts together as writing teachers and planners. To begin, I think it is beneficial to go over the agenda for this video. I will be discussing the following topics in the following order: scope and sequence, unit at a glance, annotated model lessons or AMLs, resources, and finally questions. You might have noted, but from this agenda you can see that there are some changes to the CTL role this year, and I'll be sure to highlight those changes as I go through each section. As in previous years, a digital copy of the scope and sequence is located on the 4th grade Blackboard course under Curricular Resources and then Course Visions and Supporting Documents. In this video, I will only have time to highlight a few key items, so I highly suggest that you take time to thoroughly review the document in its entirety at a later date. One of the major changes to the CTO role this year is that we will no longer be providing daily lesson plans. The biggest reason for this shift is to encourage teachers to look at the lesson cycles as more of a progression of ideas over the entire unit instead of day to day. This also gives teachers more autonomy in how they want to plan out their lessons. With that being said, it is extremely important for everyone to be aware of the pacing for each unit. As you can see here, Unit 1 will be taught over 6 weeks, including 24 instructional days and 5 flex days. In the unit at a glance, you will see shortly that I've outlined how to use those instructional days. The flex days, however, can be used at your own discretion. In the past, I've used them for intensive grammar study, assessments, whole group reteach, and writing conferences, just to give you some ideas. My final highlight for this section is the progression of readiness TEKS. This has been extremely helpful to me while lesson planning, particularly with the grammar. I think it's really nice to see what scholars should have learned in 3rd grade, what we need to teach them in 4th grade, and finally, what they'll be asked to do when they get to 5th grade. Exploring this section of the scope and sequence will really help you see how to push those high-performing scholars, as well as support those who had some deficiency from previous years. Let's move on to the unit at a glance. This document will also be located in the 4th grade writing folder, under Unit and Lesson Plans, and then that first folder that says Unit at a Glance and Unit Previews. In this unit, we're going to be focusing on personal narratives, with a great emphasis on writing small moment seed stories. Additionally, I have planned ample time for scholars to become familiar with and comfortable going through the writing process. My thought process behind this is that taking the time to walk scholars through each step early in the school year will help them become more independent writers later on when we move into different types of writing such as persuasive and/or expository pieces. The final focus for Unit 1 will be grammar. In the scope and sequence, you can see that I have us working on between 1 and 4 grammar TEKS over the course of 5 days. These TEKS are meant to be taught in conjunction with the composition, in small group, or in a daily spiral review. One change to the scope and sequence and the unit at a glance this year is that instead of actual calendar days on which to teach certain content, now we have a suggested pacing or duration. Each objective is still listed with the corresponding TEK and potential misconception, as well as aligned assessment questions. For writing, these questions will look a bit more like checks for understanding or CFU question stems. My suggestion would be to use these to guide your reteach and or to structure your writing conferences. In regards to misconceptions for Unit 1, I've split them into two sections, grammar and composition. When teaching and reviewing grammar, teachers should explicitly use the proper grammatical vocabulary. I've often noticed that even in fourth grade, scholars don't know the names for the different parts of speech. Since grammar will be a consistent focus throughout the school year, it is important to begin building that grammatical vocabulary early on. One way to do this is via the Daily Spiral reviews, as well as sentence diagramming. The second misconception I'd like to highlight is differentiating between showing versus telling a story. Scholars in fourth grade are naturally more inclined to retell events without adding specific details, dialogue, or internal thoughts. This can make their stories a bit bland. To steer scholars away from this misconception, I've made sure to include a whole day on modeling showing versus telling in the unit at a glance. As I mentioned, these are only two misconceptions that you might encounter. However, there are many more listed in the unit at a glance. Please make sure that you have looked over these before you start lesson planning. As always, if you have any questions or need help navigating the misconceptions, please don't hesitate to reach out. In lieu of daily lesson plans, this year the CTLs will be providing 10 high-quality annotated model lessons, which I will refer to as AMLs. These lessons will all be on Blackboard in the fourth grade writing folder. One of the newest and most useful features of the AMLs will be My Annotations. As you can see in this example, I've provided specific explanations for how I would structure the Do Now as well as where you can find additional resources. To conclude, most of my AMLs will follow the 5-step instructional framework. For those who aren't familiar with it, the structure is a Do Now, Hook, Introduction to New Material, Guided Practice, Exit Ticket, Independent Practice, and finally Lesson Closure. This lesson is included section times for each section, and it is based on a 60-minute lesson cycle. However, if you have more or less than 60 minutes for your writing block, feel free to adjust it accordingly. As with previous years, each CTL will be responsible for maintaining a resource and artifact folder on Blackboard. This is where I will house any relevant teaching materials for fourth grade writing. Some resources may include assessments, grammar activities, writing conference question stems, data trackers, graphic organizers, mentor texts, and then finally links to professional articles or instruction best practice books. The artifacts folder, which is new this year, will house scholar work. For writing, this will mostly include essays and planners. In order to help norm with expectations, I'll be sure to include work samples that showcase the ability of scholars at all different levels. We have finally reached the end of my video. I know that I've presented you with a multitude of information, so many of you will likely have questions. Here is my email address. Feel free to contact me anytime and I'll be sure to answer you. As a final change to the CTL role this year, we'll be adding office hours. These will be bi-weekly Skype conference calls where I will check in with my fellow writing planners so that we can better support each other. More to come on that later. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I'm looking forward to meeting you at Collaboration Day Kickoff.